well over 85,000 Americans lost their lives to overdoses during a 12-month period between August of 2019 and 2020. This is the highest number of Americans that have been lost to overdose that has been ever recorded. Stigma, you'll be surprised how often it comes from what we've been taught about mental health, what we've been taught about substance use disorders. But having more education and awareness to the issue can help us to improve both our perceptions as well as build more supportive communities that improve the outcomes and obviously reduce the negative consequences and experiences for individuals, friends, family members who have been impacted by this disease. So it's really critical that we look at stigma as one of the very important pieces of this substance use disorder crisis. We wanted to bring together a diverse panel of individuals to talk about their experiences with stigma as it relates to mental health and addiction.
My name is Jay Schiffman. I'm the founder of Choose Your Struggle. It's an organization that seeks to help end stigma around the issues of mental health and substance misuse, as well as provide honest education. I myself am a guy in long-term recovery, and the stigma for me was a big piece, not only in seeking help, but once I got help, in keeping my experience to myself, which, as we know, is one of the worst things you can do when it comes to these struggles.
My name is Kat, and I currently work with SAFE Project as a student voice liaison. I was very lucky to be part of SAFE Student Leadership Academy last year, which helps to create collegiate recovery communities on campuses. I'm someone that actually ended up going to a recovery high school, so I'm very familiar with how important ground level, on the floor work is to reducing stigma and providing really a place for people to bond over shared experiences. I still work very closely with my former recovery high school, Independence Academy, to mentor the students there. And I have a lot of experience working in group homes and working with people that are still struggling with merging their active addictions into everyday life. I'm someone that has been through the mental health system. I've been through the rehab system. I am somebody with long-term recovery. I'm a survivor of domestic violence, and I'm someone with kind of a story that's very highly stigmatized, and so I've experienced firsthand a lot of that.
I'm Stacia. I'm a certified peer recovery specialist at the Carroll County Health Department. I work primarily with the homeless population in the county, those that are homeless and living with substance use disorder and or mental health disorder. I'm someone in long-term recovery with lived experience of being one that was in very stigmatizing conversations and environments due to my own homelessness as a direct result of substance use disorder and incarceration. These conversations are not easy to have sometimes because of the stigma associated with it.
My name is Kevin Knox. I'm a certified peer recovery specialist with lived experience. I'm a person in long-term recovery. I currently hold a position at the Office of Public Defenders as a forensic peer specialist. I experienced stigma early in life as my childhood, and it kind of spilled over into my adulthood, especially in seeking recovery. The stigma associated with mental health and the way that I was brought up basically nearly killed me, well, at my own hands. Fortunately, I was able to seek help, and I didn't have to go that route. But it was a lot of misinformation that I was given from my upbringing and the environment that I lived in. I began to educate myself on mental health, substance abuse, and how it affected me and how I could help other people, which led me to becoming a certified peer recovery specialist.
One of the things we want to do out of the next few minutes we have together is to make this a conversation. Soon enough, we're going to have almost 1 million Americans who have died related to substance use disorders. And underneath that, that's just the tip of the iceberg. We know for every one person that dies, there's so many people who are crying out for help, oftentimes by non-fatal overdoses. Really, at the base of all this is people could have and could ask and seek help very early on. What is it about addiction and substance use disorders that keeps so many of us from talking about it?
I think that we are seeing overdoses as a reaction to our current mental health system, that we're dealing with a population, and I can speak for myself, that has a lot of coexisting disorders. I was dealing with PTSD, depression, anxiety, and instead of perhaps lending support for these, oftentimes we're just treating not the causes itself, but how they're presenting, which is the addiction, which is the overdose.
One of the big things is social stigma and fear. Not just social stigma, but family as well. When I talk about family, I mean feeling like a failure, feeling like you let everyone down, feeling like I let myself down. And the shame and guilt won't allow me to come forward and say I need some help.
I personally think that a lot of it comes down to the education that we implement from the very beginning of introducing the idea of addiction to young people. I mean, if you think about the way that we treat this issue, if people who are struggling with, let's say, cancer, if they knew that they spoke up, they could end up in jail, or at their best case scenario, end up in a system where 80% of the treatment for that cancer was just helping them understand that it was all in their head and that they needed to be better and not have cancer. A lot fewer people would come forward with cancer. So, these are all instituted in the way that we teach people from a very young age. If we don't start having honest and empathetic education around drug use, we're just going to keep seeing a lot of this continuing to happen.
When we talk about addiction, we talk about the negative behaviors, the incarcerations, the institutions, going to jail, breaking in people's houses, stealing old lady pocketbooks. We don't talk about the fact that it's a chronic disease. We don't talk about that. So we talk about all the things that scare people away instead of drawing people in for help, for services, for all of the things that we need coming from active addiction into the recovery aspect. So it is stigma. It's our own sometimes lack of understanding of the very disease we live with. I wasn't aware of stigmatizing words when I was there because they were all the normal words that I've heard. It was nothing unusual about these words. It was nothing associated with anything positive, but it wasn't anything that made me think twice about using them. Because unfortunately, I was one that used them too because they were the words I heard, not understanding until later on that they were stigmatizing, they were degrading and things of that nature. But I do believe that ultimately we have to understand what it is that we live with in order to be more effective. The more we know about it, the louder our voices are.
If we have the knowledge, understand addiction as a chronic disease, and that comes out of education very early, there will be, rather than shaming and guilt, we'll be able to manage it just like we do for diabetes or cancer or anything else. What messages, when we talk about education, and obviously we're going to talk also about meeting people where they are because I think that's a very important piece as well, but what messages do you think we heard, all of us here, growing up, that we think could have been playing a role in stigma that may have our other folks have heard, and how can we change those through education?
I didn't receive any information about not using, not selling, not participating, because in the environment that I grew up in, that lifestyle was socially accepted. And I was a product of my own environment. I didn't see anyone graduate. I didn't see anyone in my household go to college. I didn't see any of that until I got older and started raising kids. You can't call them role models, but the role models that was there was the people on the corner, the people that was, that looked like they had made it because they had a nice car, they had a lot of women around them, people called their name and people spoke highly, but it was all fake. And I only know that now because of my experiences. My complexion also played a part because I grew up with very low self-esteem. I'm a black male. Everyone in my family is dark. I'm the only one light. And in my neighborhood, I got picked on a lot. In my school, I got picked on a lot because in the 70s, being as light as I am wasn't popular in a black neighborhood. So I wasn't engaging in school very much, not because I wasn't smart, but I got tired of fighting. I didn't know where I belonged at. And what I'm getting at is the root to addiction lies within the self-esteem of the person most of the time. Drugs and alcohol and marijuana was glorified, it was socially accepted, and it was a way for me to escape the feelings that I had. It was a way for me to belong somewhere because I didn't know where I belonged at. The low self-esteem that I suffered, everyone around me suffered from the same low self-esteem and didn't even know it. Everyone around me suffered from the same mental health issues, but we couldn't talk about it because there was like a unwritten rule that where we came from, we don't talk about mental health. All these things together, and it creates stigma and fear in people. What I've learned after not overcoming addiction, but because I still have to work every day to stay clean. But what I mean is, if I didn't finally work on the mental health part, I wouldn't be able to get to the addiction part and stay clean because they both work together.
I also didn't hear anything positive in my growing up about anything that had anything to do with addiction, recovery, mental health. All of what I knew, or all of what I heard was negative, stigmatizing language. Grew up in a home with a parent that much of what I can remember lived his life through active addiction. So these things were almost normalized. The things that I heard about him, we were not educated. We were not educated with hope. We were not educated with an end. We was only seeing the actual behaviors of someone who continued to live in active addiction. And I'll say, I don't suffer at this point, but what I saw was suffering much of my life in his active addiction. I heard things like, if he continued to do this, he'd die. If he continued to drink, hopefully he'll make it to recovery. If he continued to go out here and rob and steal, these things will happen. This was the language I heard. I didn't hear things like I hear now, like this is someone that lives, with a chronic mental condition that disrupts his thinking, it disrupts his behavior, it disrupts positive outcomes. So they were there, but they weren't talking about it. In order to talk about your recovery, you have to have some conversation of active addiction. And because of the stigma behind it, these were the things that people were doing pretty much probably behind closed doors. Our conversations were not anything positive. It wasn't anything built on hopes and positive ideas. It wasn't anything built on the future. It wasn't anything built on the ability to have sustainable relationships and being productive members of your community. The conversations were built on the continued negative behaviors as a direct result of a disease that no one knew about or was even talking about. How do we change our conversations from what it is we see and what it is we experience to the hope that we are now hopeful for of our future?
Also, the points that we allow people to get to in this country are appalling lack of accessible mental health care, the appalling lack of care for our homeless. This is a first world country and we allow people to reach these breaking points regularly. And I think these experiences, shape individuals' views. Instead of seeing them as a person, they might see them as their experience with them on the subway.
We're moving forward in so many ways, and now at least we're talking about it, we're discussing it today. We recognize this as a chronic disease. There's millions of Americans suffering today. The number of people are, at least we think, are much more today, and they're going to be, of course, accumulations because people are living longer as well. Are there things we can do to accelerate the process of people understanding the science of addiction, the human aspect of addiction, the treatment parts, the recovery part? So what are the things that you all think, and there could be several, that we can contribute as a society ourselves, and of course with lived experience, that could accelerate, so it could go faster pace than its natural rate?
I never want to put a lot on changes to laws, because unfortunately we see how long that can take and how unlikely that tends to be at times. But the simple fact is, until we're able to, number one, end the war on drugs, and number two, stop penalizing every single person who uses, we cannot adequately give help to the people who need it. Data coming out now, that the number of people who are, the percentage of people who use to those who struggle is so much lower than has ever been talked about, right? I mean, if you listen to some of our elected leaders, the fact is they talk about it as if every single person who ever uses drugs is going to struggle with addiction, which is incredibly harmful and also not true. So until we're able to radically change this, it's going to be hard to see serious change happening. But you know, there is something to be enthusiastic about with the recent movement around calls to end the war on drugs and legalization in some states.
So I think ending this, or at least accelerating the process, begins with the youth. I think we often assume that our children are fragile and cannot handle talking about active addiction or recovery. We have a lot of children in the school system who are children of individuals in recovery, but there's not a safe space for them, and making sure that we understand that they are not fragile. If anything, they're resilient as can be, and we need to give them that and embrace that.
Our kids are not fragile, but at the same time, our kids are the future of our country, and we have to have a robust future, and we have to invest in the future of this nation as well.
As we say, the drug is the most obvious symptom of the disease that we live with. So we have symptoms way before the drug. So if we educate our children of potential risk factors, if we educate our children of some signs and symptoms, if we educate our children of some things to look forward to, then just maybe they can say, wait a minute, you know, these are some things that we talked about that can potentially lead me to the drug. Knowing that I had a parent that was at that point suffering in active addiction. But if I would have gotten a little more education on the disease and not so focused on his behavior, then maybe at 16, I could have said, wait a minute, why are you enjoying stealing that candy from that store? These are some things that could lead you to active addiction, because I hadn't picked up yet, but I was certainly exhibiting the behaviors of active addiction, but I didn't have the information. You know what I mean? So I think that if we talk more about the disease and the potential outcomes of the negative behaviors, then we kind of, you know, could give people an earlier opportunity to make a choice. You know, my choice was as a direct result of the pain. And if we can kind of catch them before that, then maybe we can kind of eliminate some of the other things that are happening, because some of what's happening now in the world today, some of the actions are of individuals who have yet to pick up.
How do we start to move to a place where we begin to not have people go through a cookie cutter approach, but be able to understand the diversity of experiences, as well as the ability to start to help people where they are in their journey?
I think a major step forward is prioritizing lived experience. Now, right now, it is so vastly shifted towards people with incredible educational experience, or maybe they were running a different organization and got this job, instead of prioritizing people with lived experience on this in this realm. And so trying to right that balance and trying to find an equal opportunity for people with lived experience is a major way forward.
I'm afforded the opportunity to sit at some tables now. Something I was never able to do before. Well, at the wrong tables. But I used to work at LEAD, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. They would give me the client name and the area that, that they frequent, and I would go right out and find them and bring them back. A couple of police officers, because we work closely with the police officers, they're like, we're the police and we can't find these people like that. How do you do it? I said, because I'm one of the people. You can't reach them the way that I can. Doesn't make me better than you? No. It's just that I have a lived experience where I understand them and I'm taking a different approach.
It's very important to meet people where they're at who are in active addiction, and we do so by showing up and listening and not judging and just being there, because that can go so far. But we also need to meet people on the other side of the coin, people that have no idea about addiction, no idea about any of this. I think part of that is being vocal. I am a suburban housewife. I am a crack and meth addict. I'm not ashamed of those things or afraid of the stigma that comes with them, because I think it's so important to be able to paint the picture of the happy, healthy housewife that used to smoke crack, because, these things are possible. And it's how we talk to our children about these things also. It's educating our children on the in-between, because the messages I got in my health classes from my family about drugs were, like cocaine. Cocaine gives you euphoria. Cocaine's highly addictive. People, they snort cocaine and they do bad things. There is an in-between in that. We need to fully explore drug use and make it known instead of allowing it to hide in the shadows. We can do a lot of work on the ground level, but we will still always need that legislature. We will always need that also. I think another thing that needs to be addressed is merging the recovery communities, because I think people that work in this community understand that a lot of the time there are people that are for AA and there are harm reductionists, and that's another stigmatized area. When we all need to realize we're all on the same team. We're all for what works.
Recovery is not linear. It's not where you have to do it this way, where you have to be out there for 30 years and go on a 28-day treatment and then go into a recovery house and then do it on your own. Some people, there's some things that are on the platform now that was not there before, such as harm reduction. Still very stigmatizing. Medicaid treatment, assisted treatment, still very stigmatizing. More that's added to the conversation now that just was not there 30 and 40 years ago. A big part of it is being open-minded. We can't automatically assume that our way is the way. It's a way, but it's not the way. Welcome the conversation that people are willing to have at that time. So, I think that we're kind of get there by allowing them to come as they choose. None of this is cookie cutter. None of this is, has to be done this way, point A to point B. Sometimes we go from A to C and D in this process with individuals, so if we can remain open-minded, even with our stories, to welcome the individual that's not quite sure of what it is they're seeking. But remembering that this thing is not linear, that it doesn't have to be through my eyes. I always say, I know different, but I don't know better. So remember that it's still their choice. And, just remember that, I'm there to help and be supportive and welcome them when they're ready to go.
We're here because we have had hope. We didn't lose hope during the process. In about 20 years from now, Where do you see the world of stigma? Where do you see the world of addiction? What do you see? Where do you see this happening if we all did the right thing and we went the right way? What do you see if we had the prism to look at 20 years from now?
I hope that going to get treatment for substance misuse and addiction is like going to your doctor and then being referred to a specialist like anything else. If you have cancer, you go to your doctor and you talk about who you're going to go see, and you may even go see a couple of people to see what's going to be right for you. How amazing would that be if that's what we could do with someone struggling with the worst throes of substance misuse and addiction? So seeing it rolled back into the health system like it should be and not having to rely on outside for-profit people would be fantastic.
I would like to see in 20 years the decriminalization of drugs so we can begin treating addiction as what it is instead of treating it as a crime. I would hope to see somebody that is selling drugs be able to get help from a mental health system that is not a cookie cutter one size fits all, but actually addresses the root causes. I'd like to see our country move towards compassion for people and move towards helping instead of incarcerating individuals.
I hope that when people are having conversations about substance abuse and mental health, and when somebody says stigmatizing language, that they have to Google it or research it to find out what stigmatizing language was used back in the day 20 years ago, because it's no longer used at that point. That we're talking more about what we've done and less about what we have to do at that point. I'm hoping that the conversations that we have are more positive about moving forward and not dragging through the mud the things that we the mistakes that we continue to make over the years, between then and now. So I'm just hoping that the conversation of anything negative will have to be researched, that we're no longer using the language, we're no longer having the thoughts, we're no longer living in, people continue to live in hopelessness, but that they can see hope and find hope in others.
My dream is that we will be talking about this in past tense. I know that's a large order, but that, I'm hopeful that a lot of the stigma and obstacles that are in our way today would be something of the past that we would talk about. I know we're going to always have some issues and some things are going to arise, but I'm hopeful that the bigger part of that would be a thing of the past.
If we had a few more individuals like our panelists today and were given the ability to change the world, we will see a very different world, country 20 years from now, or even before that. We all need to be, have a little bit of understanding and compassion. If you all did that, I think the collective compassion and understanding will help us go along a long way in this country.